we expect the cargo revenue to decline slightly, and but still going to be higher than the revenue generated by air cargo in 2019. So that's one trend. And the other trend is that if you look at the total revenues for airline business, because of the strong recovery from the passenger side, and the total revenue gonna actually still increase this year, and probably bring us to 93% of the revenue generated in 2019. So that is cargo and passenger revenue combined. That's also positive things.
Hello, my name is Lakshmi Ajay. I'm an associate editor with Stack Media, and today I'm in conversation with Dr. Bojun Wang. He is the cargo economist at IATA. Thank you, Bojun, for joining us for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start off by asking you that, you spoke at the World Cargo Symposium at one of the sessions earlier today on the economic outlook and how the air freight industry has been impacted by economic pressures in the past 12 months and what might lie ahead. Could you share some salient points from the same for our viewers?
Sure. There is no doubt that we have a challenging year in 2022, whereas in 2022, it's only 3.4%. So it's a sharp slowdown from 2021 to 2022. In addition to that, we have the war in Ukraine and high inflation rate, high fuel prices, and all that headwinds is not simply go away. Some of them still persist in the new year of 2023. So with all that headwinds, according to the latest forecast by International Monetary Fund, IMF, this year, the GDP growth at a global scale is going to be 2.8%. So this 2.8% is well below the 3.8% average GDP growth between 2000 and 2019. But I want to emphasize we are nowhere near a global recession, which refers to a negative GDP growth. So we should be fine there. But still, the growth is very slow compared with previous years. That's one big challenge. And I want to explain it a little bit. This slow growth is simply because many countries are still absorbing the shocks from all those headwinds that I just mentioned, but also the recent tightening of the global financial conditions. With all that, the air cargo business actually, I think, did fairly well if we compare this macroeconomic climate. Last year, we closed the global CTK, which measures the demand of air cargo business, and by only 1.6% below the 2019 level. So we tracked very close to the level of pre-COVID. Under this multiple headwinds, I would say it also shows once again how resilient our industry is in this challenging time. Another point I want to cover is that capacity is coming up. And even over the past 2 years, in 2022, the demand is slightly going down, and airlines kept adding capacities. And all those capacities, majority of them are driven by the back of the passenger aircraft capacities, which refers to the passenger belly capacity. So that's actually a good thing, and I think we're all happy to see this trend because that shows the recovery of our industry, not just cargo, but passenger side as well. But driven by this capacity increase and also the trending down of the demand, especially in the second half of 2022, it does put some downward pressure on our industry load factors. In that, then if you look at the yields or the cargo price, it's also trending down. But I want to emphasize here that even if it's trending down, it's still at above 2019 level. And so the yields are still okay, I would say, for this year. Let's look at a near-term outlook for 2023. What we expect from our financial forecast by IATA show that the yields will continue to decline by about 23% this year. 23% seems like a big number, but if you look at what growth we achieved in 2020, 2021, and 2022, this is just coming back from a very high level. And again, as I said, even with this 23% decline in yields, we're still gonna have higher yields compared with pre-COVID. So in terms of our CTK, the demand of the air cargo for the new year 2023, we are expecting it to decline slightly by 4%. And if you consider all those macroeconomic headwinds we're gonna have, and for this year, I would say that's still a reasonable situation for the cargo business. And the revenue for 2023 this year will be moderate slightly compared with last year, but still it's gonna be about 50% higher than the revenue generated in 2019.
So, cargo saw a bit of play during post the COVID years, record years. So, and a lot of cargo carriers and air carriers, they ordered freighters. So, are we in any situation moving towards an overcapacity?
I wouldn't say it's overcapacity. I would say it's slightly diverted from the balanced supply and the demand that we saw during the COVID. And that was because during the COVID, we have a strong demand for the air cargo to transport goods and vaccinations, all those essential things we need during that period. And also from the passenger side, many passenger aircraft that were grounded by that. So we have this balanced supply and demand. And if you look at our industry load factors during that period, it was pretty high. But once we come into the 2022, and as I said previously, with the return of passenger aircraft and the belly capacity from the passenger side, the balance is slightly
Skewed
exactly.
towards overcapacity?
Towards slightly overcapacity, but I think we're still fine. We should be still fine in this regard.
In one of your slides in the Industry Outlook Air Transport in an Uncertain Future, released by IATA last October, you mentioned that air cargo prices are still competitive and that relative air and maritime cargo rates favor air cargo based on analyzing the ratio of chargeable weight rates per kg for air cargo and container. Could you perhaps break this down and how does this bode for this sector?
I'm glad that you asked this question, and that is the presentation I did last October, and since changed quite a bit since then. And I actually have an update chart in the presentation I did this morning. So we say that, yes, we compared the yields of air cargo versus the yields of containers. And that's one of the ways we track the competitiveness of air cargo. And from October last year, where I did my presentation that you referred, and till now, the air cargo price actually lost its competitive advantage over containers in terms of price. The chart that I show have these three lines in horizontal lines, which measures the ratio of the yields of air cargo and containers. The upper bound of the line is the historical maximum ratio pre-COVID, and the lower bound is a historical minimum level of that ratio. If you look at the trends of this ratio, and during COVID pandemic, that ratio actually dropped below the historical minimum pre-COVID level. That would mean air cargo was more attractive than containers, and what we say is a competitive advantage of pricing for air cargo over shipping. However, that competitive advantage ended at the end of 2022. I believe it's December 2022. So that trends picked up again, and now we are exceed the historical minimum lower bound again. So all those, I would say, it's since going back to normal. Because if you look at pre-COVID, aviation have its unique advantage of transporting goods and service at the fastest and most affordable price. But because shipping is slower and longer distance, and traditionally it's cheaper than air cargo. The reason why we have this price competitiveness advantage during COVID is because, yes, you can see air cargo yields increased, but even more so for the container yields. So the shipping industry have even more expensive yields for transporting goods and service during that challenging time. So that's where we have this competitive advantage.
As someone who studies the air cargo industry so closely, would you say that e-commerce has sort of interjected and changed the industry in some ways?
Yeah, definitely. I think e-commerce is play a core part of our business. And especially during COVID, the large proportion of the demand increase came from e-commerce because people need to work from home, and all they can do is to shopping from home and purchasing goods and new products. Right. So that will still play a key role in the future for our business, and we are still very positive regarding the prospects of e-commerce in the coming future.
The US-China relationship shadows air cargo growth between the two countries. Could you give some numbers to highlight this and what this means for the air cargo sector?
I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but at IATA, we are always welcome on the openness and the free trade and the free flow of people and services. So any kind of trade tensions or trade wars are not something we'd like to see. And we still encourage countries to encourage free trade and free flow of people.
What would you say is the importance of the pharma sector? We saw that, it came into focus during the pandemic because of the vaccine transportation. There were so many innovations that followed that, right? Especially with respect to temperature controlled situations. So how does that, interject with the air cargo sector?
I think, again, it's similar to e-commerce. Pharmaceutical is one of the driving force of the demand growth during COVID. And the situation is that we are almost get over COVID-19. And that demand diminished inevitably. But I think once again, it shows that air transport was the only mode possible to transport the pharmaceutical at the speedy, timely manner. And I hope we won't have the pandemic like that in a very long future. But if that's the case, and we still need to rely on air cargo, and that will be always the case. And I think lessons learned for this pandemic is that our supply chain need to be better prepared. And you mentioned this low temperature transporting, and I know many freighters and business start to prepare and see the opportunities there. So that's also a very positive development.
Is it good for the air cargo industry to embrace digitalization at a faster pace than it is doing right now?
Yes, definitely. I think that's one of the themes of this World Cargo Symposium. Digitalization is a key, and that's back to the data issue, right? I think we all need more standardized and one record data, and where we know where the cargo flows and what are the changes to the different goods we transported. So that's all relies on more efficient data collection, and digitalization plays a key role in that regard.
Any trends that you can tell us that you forecast based on the numbers that you made in your presentation today?
We have the near-term forecast. It's just for the 2023 year, and our latest forecast was published in December last year, and we're going to have an updated version very soon for our AGM in June, and that is regarding the financial forecast for the air cargo business.
So any interesting trends that you can sound us off?
We expect the cargo revenue to decline slightly, and but still going to be higher than the revenue generated by air cargo in 2019. So that's one trend. And the other trend is that if you look at the total revenues for airline business, because of the strong recovery from the passenger side, and the total revenue gonna actually still increase this year, and probably bring us to 93% of the revenue generated in 2019. So that is cargo and passenger revenue combined. That's also positive things.
Thank you for this conversation, Dr. Bojun.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.